I'm delighted to be sitting down with John Rice, founder and CEO of Management Leadership for Tomorrow, or MLT. Through MLT, he's focused on creating career opportunities for the next generation leaders of color. MLT's Black Equity at Work certification is the first of its kind clear standard and roadmap for companies looking to be leaders on racial equity. Prior to MLT, John held executive posts with the NBA and the Walt Disney Company. John, we're honored to have you here with us today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Ahmad.
Well, let's start on MLT. I know a lot about your organization. I know many of us who've gone to business school are familiar with your impact. But for the Silicon Valley leaders in the audience, tell us more about what you do at MLT and who you work with.
The short story in MLT is, we're nearly 20-year-old nonprofit organization that really focuses on advancing racial equity in this country, and we focus on two areas, two key levers to move the needle. The first one is on the individual side, which really focuses on putting more economic mobility, economic power, and influence in the hands of people of color, and that's helping them go from college to those first jobs, that actually the kinds of first jobs that close the deal in economic mobility for them and their families, and we also provide the coaching and the high performance playbook and the social capital to help Black and brown students and professionals advance through key thresholds toward the senior leadership ranks where they can have a high impact both in their organizations and their communities. We've worked with about 10,000 folks project to date, about 2,500 fellows on an annual basis that go through our programs, again, that span college through the senior executive suite. And our goal is really to develop 1,000 plus senior leaders. We're about 40% there. So we've got some more work to do, but we're excited about our progress. The second lever that is really focused on the institutional side of our work. We work with about 200 companies, many in the tech sector and out in the Valley, and help them take essentially a more rigorous approach to moving the needle on DEI. And we think that's obviously important because for employers to move the needle on DEI, that widens the road certainly for individuals, and essentially, we work with about 200 organizations, and with a comprehensive suite of offerings to help them move the needle on DEI and racial equity, from campus recruiting, lateral recruiting, helping them advance and retain the talent that they have, as well as an advisory offering. We have a consulting arm that helps them the how-to strategies and tactics of moving the needle toward critical mass of diverse talent at all stages of your organization. And about a year ago, we also launched a racial equity certification that helps to kind of establish an absolute standard for racially equitable workplace practices. So we've got a two-pronged model. We're excited about the progress, and it's really we're about an organization that has about 200 folks that are based all around the country, and we have a real focus, over the past 6 to 7 years on moving the needle and diversifying the tech sector with a full team out in the Bay Area as well.
Well, John, let's double click on moving the needle. And you talk about your partnerships, the companies, 200 plus companies, as you know. I see on the list many SVLG members, Google, Apple, Meta, LinkedIn. You've got titans like Salesforce here in the Valley. I'm curious now, as we talk about solutions and innovations, maybe first a global question. Where are mistakes being made? Not with those companies per se, but the organizations trying to move the needle on DEI. Where do you see organizations falling short, or what are the most common mistakes? And how do we move forward from those shortfalls to move the needle in the right direction?
We've spent a lot of time looking at this. Again, I think our lens is, having worked deeply with 200 plus companies and 10,000 individuals, I think we've got unique insights, both into the things that are working as well as the things that are challenges, the traps that organizations fall into. And I think the key takeaway around where organizations are most challenged is that they're actually caught, Ahmad, in a what I call a doom loop. Okay, and that doom loop starts with misreading the drivers of where they are today and why, and that speaks to how diverse employees experience the organization, what the and how that's different from their white peers, and we're also kind of unclear on the root causes of their recruiting and retention challenges, and so in any other part of our business, we would actually get focus on getting smart about the drivers of the problem and obviously the opportunity as well. But when it comes to DEI, actually we actually are not well informed about those drivers, and we kind of take what I call kind of a moral equity approach. It's the right thing to do, so let's try to move the needle and do the best that we can. And I think that if you think about it, the way we, in any other business, what do? You rigorous analysis of where you are and why. Then you sort of say, okay, if we're trying to acquire a company, launch a new business, expand to a new market, we say where we want to be in 3 to 5 years. How do we define success qualitatively and quantitatively? And then we say, well, okay, given that definition of success, then what are the levers we need to invest in to give us our best chance of getting there? How do we prioritize those levers? What are the interim metrics we want to establish? And what's the organizational approach to getting there? That's kind of business 101. Right. And when it comes to DEI, the major challenge is that we don't do any of those things, right? We don't do the rigorous analysis of why we are where we are. And because conversations about race and gender are a little uncomfortable, we don't establish a clear definition of what success looks like in 3 to 5 years. And then when you don't do that, it's hard to prioritize your investment levers. It's hard you can't set any interim metrics that are meaningful, and you can't hold anybody accountable in terms of the organizational approach. So essentially what we have is a bunch of incredibly smart companies that are innovating in all areas of our society, that are approaching this with a different level of rigor when it comes to DEI. And when you do that, you essentially land with a strategy instead of tactics that are, you could argue, can be defined as sort of let's do better than last year. And there isn't one member organization that in the SVLG that would who has a CEO that would say that would be okay with if their senior team came to them and said, our strategy for the next few years is to do better than last year. And when you have a let's do better than last year strategy, unfortunately, then that leads to what we call random acts of diversity. A lot of initiatives, activities that on paper look good and individually are often very thoughtful, but are not bound in a cohesive strategy that if you say, if we do these 3, or 4 or 5 things and execute them well, then we're going to move the needle. So essentially what we need is to elevate the level of rigor, with around the approach. And that fundamental problem is exacerbated when there aren't a lot of great benchmarks for organizations that are doing it, at a high level of rigor. And then when you execute with a low level of rigor, sort of let's do better than last year approach, guess what? The outcomes don't come, and then the confidence remains low. And that's really the loop that we've got to get organizations out of, right? We've got to help them understand rigorous approach, give them the best practices and benchmarks, and then make sure that the outcomes are actually come from from that rigorous approach. And that's what builds confidence among senior executives that they can move the needle. So we just got to change this from a doom loop to a success loop. And that's really the core of the effort that we've taken on in my organization, to make sure that we move organizations from that doom loop to the success loop, both within the strategy, change management, tactics, but also supporting them with the executional efforts around talent sourcing, talent retention, and advancement.
Well, John, I love that doom loop to success loop. Clearly, it's a visual that paints the picture of where there are issues and opportunities that are acknowledged, but a clear path to fix them. And I want to talk about that rigorous approach. I think it's highly relevant what you've shared, as we heard from Melody Hobson and Enrique Lores earlier, that the tangible targets, the incentives are so important to driving change around DEI. The 25 by 25 program we've been talking about here at SVLG, it's all the same thing. And I think with Black equity at work, you're getting towards that comprehensive solution. But what does rigorous approach to DEI mean, and how do we tangibly implement that in our leading companies?
So let me give you an example by double clicking on our MLT Black Equity at Work initiative, and I'll start essentially saying that what we really set out to do well over a year ago was to try to move the needle on racial equity at the, among employers at a kind of systems level, right? We have been working in our organization for several years, providing the kind of rigor that I just described to, within the context of our advisory practice, working with one organization at a time, right, like many consulting firms do. But we felt it was important to try to scale a kind of a systems changing effort. And where we found that the biggest gap was that we thought we could fill was it was essentially the opportunity to establish for the first time a concrete and absolute standard for what racially equitable employer practices look like. Think about akin to the LEED standard, in environmental sustainability.
John, but just to clarify, so the audience understands, when you say a first standard of its kind, were there multiple standards that existed that were a patchwork, or you noticed that this just across the board wasn't in place, and that's where your initiative filled the gap?
Right. It's really the latter, that there is no absolute standard. There hasn't been historically an absolute standard for what good looks like, okay, across people, across purchasing and suppliers, and across community engagement and philanthropy. And so in the past, yes, there are rankings and awards, but that have been out there and pledges. All of those are actually built around a relative standard, okay? And what we found after George Floyd was murdered, okay, and after so many great companies put out these, very strong statements standing against racism in all forms, and when their, Black and brown and even white employees stood up and said, "Hey, time out. We commend you for those important statements, but actually that our lived experience within an organization that is really fundamentally inconsistent with what we're saying we stand for and stand against, right?" And that was when we all realized, okay, that even if we were highly ranked on a diversity score, diversity ranking, publicized ranking, we were well below the bar of what is acceptable if there's racism alive and well in our organization. So we felt it was really important to, for the first time, establish an absolute standard and when the great thing is, when you establish an absolute standard, then organizations can manage to that, right, with a level of rigor and accountability that they apply in every other part of their business. So this was really about trying to move on a systems level from a let's do better than last year level of rigor that's just not acceptable to comprehensive approach to moving the needle on racial equity, holding ourselves accountable in the process. And essentially the framework that we developed with the Boston Consulting Group and a number of other firms has 5 pillars, and they cut across, representation at all levels of the firm, to inclusive, anti-racist work environment, compensation equity, supplier and, supply chain and diversity in your business practices, as well as community engagement and philanthropy. And the idea here is critical. That we designed this so that we would create an on-ramp for such that no matter where you are in the journey, you could be an emerging tech company with no diverse employees, a venture capital firm, a private equity firm, just at the very beginning of your journey, or you could be a consumer products company that's well along. That just doesn't matter where you are on the journey, but the first part of the Black Equity Work certification is actually is a developing, with our help, a rigorous racial equity plan built around the 5-pillar framework that I described. And that plan, first step is gets approved based on rigor alone, okay, not related to where you are in the journey. And then after you get the plan approved, okay, then you have the opportunity to, over the course of several years, to move the needle on that plan. Sorry, my dog's making noise over here. And get to a level of a threshold of points on a 100-point scale that where you get rewarded for being certified, okay, as a Black Equity Work organization. So the idea here really is critical, that we're calling organizations in, okay, not calling them out, because we're providing that on-ramp that's accessible to everybody, and then all of the work that you do, is confidential, and if you don't make your initial goal in terms of points and so forth, then you're still working on it, but you don't get called out. Okay. So the idea really is about, all focused on helping organizations move the needle, and then providing the best practices that we've built and the insights that we've gained from working with tens of companies one-on-one in our advisory practice. And we're excited about that. We've got really incredible momentum, over 50 companies that have committed to this, none of whom, interesting, I think, would say, they are where they want to be, but they're decided that they've stepped up to, to redefine how we approach this whole process. Again, to take a comprehensive approach and hold themselves accountable. And it's a rigorous standard. And this is essentially, organizations putting in the work, acknowledging they're not where they want to be, but that's not the issue. It's what progress are they making? Are they taking a rigorous approach? And we think that's critical to investors. It's very important in terms of the establishing what rigor around the S and ESG. And it's really important to talent. And it's really important to your business partners. So we're very excited about where this can go. We see this scaling up to hundreds of companies in the coming years.
Well, it's an incredible effort. And as you say, the rigor behind it gives me a lot of faith that we'll see a foundation that's built for change, right? I'd like to talk about, the business leaders we have operationalizing change, right? Where they can apply their leadership principles to driving change around something like DEI that just isn't where it needs to be. Our summit is Innovating Equity. We're talking about the measures, the metrics, the methods that our companies are putting into practice to drive change in innovative ways here in Silicon Valley. You've got a partnership with Greylock. I know you work around, work with venture capitalists. That is not a space that I would view as being, frankly, very diverse as someone who's here and around the Valley. Tell me a little bit more about that and maybe the venture capital and those partnerships.
Yeah. So let me start by saying, that we believe that the tech, VC, and PE ecosystem, is one of the most important ecosystems that we need to transform in a good way to make more inclusive and more diverse, because it is simultaneously, the center of wealth creation in our country, and the center of wealth disparity. Okay, and so we have a really intentional strategy to diversify all aspects of the ecosystem. And our starting point, the good news is we're really making great progress. We have 2,000 MLTers who are currently working in tech, and larger organizations, and even I think over 400 emerging portfolio organizations. And that's, and over half of those 2,000 folks are, in the Bay Area. And we have about 70 MLTers who are working in venture capital, 12, VC funds that are founded by MLTers that have raised, an aggregate over $1 billion. So, all of them 50 million or more. So we've got a real strong base to build on, but we have, a real 10-year strategy to transform, the sector, everything from founders of color, entrepreneurs, to the venture capital and large tech companies. So that's context. And we began partnering with Greylock over a year ago because they they came to us and said, look, we want to play an important role in diversifying the ecosystem. And so we outlined, 4 or 5 key areas that we're working with them on, and they include coordinating, establishing, making the tweaks, as I talked about, in the talent recruitment, talent acquisition, and talent management engines within Greylock. Okay, investor track roles in particular, as well as making the tweaks and getting more talent into their portfolio companies. Okay, those 2 areas, and then also helping to support and connect and accelerate founders of color so they can get into the venture capital funding ecosystem at places like Greylock and others, and in a deeper dive also in terms of the DEI practices. Okay, as I talked about earlier, the practices both within their portfolio and within their organization. And the last piece is that they've decided that one of the things that's going to be really important is to diversify their LP base. And we're operating nonprofit organization. We're not a bunch of well-heeled investors, okay, like the endowments and the foundations and the family offices that are largely LPs and major venture capital funds. But our work, we're the best at at driving, at executing the engine that will diversify the tech ecosystem. So the extent to which an organization like Greylock, as they make money for their LPs, that supercharges our capital base and helps us do more work to diversify the ecosystem, then it helps to address their goals and their challenges.
John, I want to make sure we touch on this before we close, the perishability of this moment, right, and how we keep up the momentum. Clearly, what we're talking about here, putting rigor behind change, operationalizing change with targets and incentives, putting our business know-how behind driving much needed change related to DEI. Those are going to be the keys to success, the big takeaways from this summit. How, in your view, or maybe what would you tell our CEOs to ensure that the momentum behind this moment isn't lost?
I think it's really important for CEOs, to think about the importance of building on this moment to establish a what I would call a mindset shift that leads to a change in practices, and leads to winning practices with winning outcomes. And what do I mean by that? Very quickly, those leaders who do believe in equity, who are not racist, which is the vast majority, they need to move beyond what I think is a false narrative that has been established when it comes to DEI and racial equity. And that false narrative, essentially, that at the end of the day, it's them, not us. Meaning, it's the people of color, not us. It's a pipeline issue, or it's a performance issue, or it's the racist white people, not us, who believe in equity, or it's the government's role to address some of these persistent racial inequities in healthcare, in policing, in education, and so forth. I think the opportunity is for leaders, especially leaders who believe in equity, to take a rigorous approach. Okay. And in order to do that, we have to be well informed about why we are where we are, and what we need to do to move the needle. And at the end of the day, when we're well informed, okay, about why we are where we are and what we need to do to move the needle, then we will actually embrace the same level of rigor that we apply to everything else. And that actually will enable us to start embedding that rigor into our DEI and racial equity practices, as we do in all aspects of our business. So it's up to, I think, incumbent upon organizations like mine and others to drive forward and help, like I say, help drive organizations and leaders toward those rigorous standards and best practices, and share the insights that we have, so that we can actually embed that rigor in everything we do. And that needs to be combined, candidly, with the incentives, as you talked about, for racially equitable practices. And those incentives need to come from investors. Those incentives need to come from talent themselves, and as well as business partners. And when this begins to work like the same equation in the heads of really innovative, smart leaders, that when DEI starts working with the same equation, then every other part of our business, then actually everything, that's when we will start to see the momentum pick up. So it's just about rigor, and it starts with moving beyond a moral equity mindset, moving to a business equity mindset, and then embedding those practices across the work that we do.
Thank you so much, John. It's an amazing conversation. We all are aware that we've got work to do here in Silicon Valley, but I don't know how you can't leave this conversation and this summit not being inspired about the progress we're making. Thank you, John. I want to ask you a fun question before we close out, and deeply grateful for the conversation. Is it true? Are you responsible for John Legend's music career? We read this about you in the research. I want to pose it to you while we've got you on live.
I can't take credit for John Legend's music career. It's his talent and hard work that's got him there. But I think the small world story is, that John John worked just before he became famous. For 2 or 3 years, he worked at MLT and helped us start the organization. And he used to be a consultant. When he was a few years out of college at the Boston Consulting Group, and happened to be on a team that was doing our initial business plan and strategy, and he did a great job. And he came up to me after the end of the project and said, "Hey, Johnny, I'm trying to, launch a music career, and I can't be traveling around 4 days a week as a BCG consultant. Can I come work for you? And with some flexibility in my schedule. And I said, and he's a really brilliant person. I said, hell yeah, come on. And so he worked for us for 3 years, launched our undergraduate program, has been a great champion, board member, spokesperson for many years, and great friend. So
Wow.
we've been able to watch his rise as a recording artist, and as a as a multi-platform icon. But we can't say, I certainly can't take credit for his success.
Well, I tried to give you an opportunity there, John, but again, thank you so much. And anything that we and our leaders in Silicon Valley can do to be supportive of your efforts, let's please stay in touch.
Thank you so much.